The air smelled of blood and plasma discharge. Jonah Marston moved quickly, his breath steady despite the carnage unfolding around him. Gunfire echoed through the ruined valley, bright streaks of energy flashing past as two warring factions fought for dominance over the once thriving colony of Draxus 4. Jonah wasn't here to fight. He was a medic, first and foremost. His boots crunched against broken debris as he rushed toward the distress beacon flashing on his wristpad. Someone was still alive in this hell. The forward line had collapsed an hour ago, and the retreat order had been given, but Jonah had stayed behind, refusing to abandon the wounded. "Jonah, what's your status?" The voice of his commander, Captain Dallard, crackled in his earpiece. "Still in the field," Jonah muttered, ducking as a stray plasma round seared the air inches from his head. He pressed himself against the charred remains of a fallen transport shuttle. "I've got a distress signal coming from the wreckage near the old comms tower." "You're insane," Dallard growled. "We're evacuating now. You have less than 10 minutes before this entire sector is bombed to hell." "Understood," Jonah replied, and kept moving. As he approached the signal's location, he spotted the remains of a massive skirmish. Bodies, both human and alien, lay scattered across the ground. Smoke curled into the sky, painting the battlefield in eerie shades of gray. Then he saw her. A figure half buried beneath a collapsed support beam, her pale, shimmering skin marred with blood and dirt. She wasn't human, that much was clear. Her robes, though torn and burnt, bore intricate golden embroidery, unlike anything Jonah had seen before. But what struck him most were her eyes. Closed, yet her face remained serene, as though she had accepted her fate. Jonah's pulse quickened. He didn't know who she was. He only knew he couldn't leave her here to die. Jonah knelt beside her, scanning her vitals with his wristpad. Her heartbeat was weak but present. "You're not dying on me," he murmured, already pulling out a biofoam injector from his medkit. She stirred slightly, her eyelids fluttering. A faint groan escaped her lips, but she was too weak to open her eyes. Jonah glanced at the debris pinning her down. The support beam was massive, twisted metal pressing against her lower body. Moving it by hand was impossible. He gritted his teeth. No time for hesitation. Jonah reached into his pack, pulling out a microdet charge. It was meant for cutting through ship hulls, but today it would serve a different purpose. "Hang on, lady," he muttered, planting the charge at the base of the beam. "This might sting." He stepped back, shielding her as he detonated the charge. The explosion was small but precise. The metal groaned before the beam rolled off her with a final, deafening crash. Jonah was at her side in an instant, checking for spinal injuries. She needed stabilizing fast. Her breathing hitched, her eyes opened. Jonah froze. They were golden, shimmering even in the dim battlefield haze. For a second, it wasn't just pain he saw in them. It was something ancient, powerful. Then she spoke. Her voice was hoarse but strong. "Why?" Jonah blinked. "Why what?" Her fingers weakly grasped his sleeve. "Why? Save me?" Jonah let out a breathless laugh. "Because that's what I do." A flicker of something passed across her face, something Jonah couldn't name. But she didn't say anything more. Her body went limp again. Jonah worked quickly, sealing her wounds with biofoam, his hands steady despite the chaos around him. His wristpad beeped with an incoming message. "Dallard. Jonah, you need to move. Now." Jonah slung the woman over his shoulder, his muscles screaming in protest, and ran. The battlefield was collapsing around them, fire spreading, the sky flashing with the approach of incoming bombers. Jonah didn't stop. Whoever this woman was, whatever her story, it didn't matter. She was alive, and Jonah was going to make sure she stayed that way. As Jonah pushed through the rubble, each step became a testament to his resolve. He navigated through the scorched remnants of the battlefield, the old woman's weight a constant reminder of the life he clung to. Finally, he reached the evacuation zone, a temporary setup nestled within a protective shield bubble at the edge of the conflict zone. The medics on site quickly took the woman from his arms, laying her gently on a stretcher. Jonah watched as they administered advanced healing agents, marveling at the subtle luminescence that began to emanate more strongly from her skin, knitting her wounds together with an ethereal glow. Before Jonah could follow her to the medical tent, a sharp command cut through the air. He turned to see a group of soldiers marching toward him. Their armor wasn't marked with the insignia of any faction he recognized, a deep blue highlighted with gold, reflecting a regality that felt out of place on such a grim battlefield. The leader, a tall figure whose helmet underlaid features of distinguished authority, stopped in front of Jonah. When the soldier removed his helmet, Jonah was met with a stern but youthful face, his eyes reflecting a tumultuous ocean of responsibility and power. "I am King Marion of the Celestial Realms," the figure announced, his voice resonant and commanding. "You have saved my mother, Queen Mother Isara. Where is she?" Jonah, taken aback by the revelation, gestured toward the medical tent. "She's being treated over there." Without another word, King Marion strode towards the tent. Jonah followed, his curiosity piqued by the unfolding events and the identity of the woman he had rescued. Inside the medical tent, Queen Mother Isara was already sitting up, her vitality seemingly restored by the alien medicine. She looked up as her son entered, a mixture of relief and maternal affection washing over her face. "Marion," she breathed, her voice stronger now. King Marion quickly moved to her side, taking her hand in his. The reunion was touching, filled with an unspoken conversation of looks and touches that conveyed years of mutual respect and love. Jonah watched from a distance, feeling like an intruder on a private moment, yet unable to tear himself away. It was only when King Marion turned to him, his expression softened by gratitude, that Jonah stepped forward. "Jonah Marston," King Marion began, "you have done a service to the celestial realms beyond measure. My mother speaks highly of your bravery and skill. As king, it is within my power to grant you a boon for your service. What would you have of me?" Jonah was stunned. He had acted on instinct, driven by his oath as a medic to aid those in need. Now, confronted with the king's gratitude, he felt the weight of his actions. "Your Majesty, Jonah hesitated, unsure. Then clarity struck. "There are many still suffering on the battlefield. If I could request anything, it would be resources to help the injured. More medics, better supplies, anything to alleviate their suffering." King Marion considered this for a moment, then nodded decisively. "It shall be done. The Celestial Realms will provide aid to the conflict zone, not as conquerors, but as healers. Your compassion has inspired this, Jonah Marston." As arrangements were made swiftly, Jonah found himself at the center of an unprecedented humanitarian mission. Supplies and medics from the Celestial Realms poured into the evacuation zone, transforming it from a makeshift triage center into a well-equipped field hospital. Jonah worked tirelessly, overseeing the distribution of supplies and the care of the wounded. Queen Mother Isara, fully recovered, often joined him, her presence bringing comfort and a regal kind of solace to the injured soldiers. Through it all, Jonah realized that his simple act of saving one life had spiraled into a larger ripple of healing and peace. He watched as soldiers from opposing sides were treated under the same tents, their common humanity acknowledged and respected. This unexpected journey from medic to peacemaker had changed Jonah. As he looked out over the bustling field hospital, he felt a deep sense of fulfillment. His actions had not only saved a queen, but it also sparked a beacon of hope in a war-torn world. The gratitude of a king had turned into a legacy of healing that Jonah would carry with him forever. As the field hospital under the banner of the Celestial Realms grew, Jonah Marston found himself increasingly in the limelight. What had started as a routine mission was now a beacon of hope on the ravaged planet of Draxus 4. With the support of King Marion and the personal involvement of Queen Mother Isara, the hospital became a sanctuary not only for soldiers but also for civilians caught in the crossfire. Jonah, though a medic, was thrust into a leadership role. He coordinated supply drops, organized medical teams, and negotiated temporary ceasefires with the warring factions. His days began before sunrise and often ended long after the twin suns of Draxus had set. Despite the exhaustion, Jonah felt a profound sense of purpose. He was making a difference, healing wounds both physical and metaphorical. One evening, as he walked through the rows of beds filled with recovering soldiers, Jonah was approached by King Marion. The king, usually so composed, seemed unusually contemplative as he observed the patients. "This place, it's more than just a hospital now," King Marion remarked, his gaze sweeping over the injured being cared for by an interstellar team of medics. "You've built something extraordinary here, Jonah." "It's not just my doing, Your Majesty," Jonah replied, wiping his hands on his medical apron. "It's thanks to your support and, of course, your mother's incredible strength and compassion." King Marion nodded, but his eyes remained troubled. "You know, when I first heard that my mother was missing, I prepared for the worst. I never imagined that a human medic would be the one to save her. You've changed how I view this war, and perhaps our strategies need rethinking." Jonah listened intently. It wasn't every day that a king confessed doubts about his leadership in the midst of a conflict. "If there's anything more I can do to help bring peace, you need only ask," Jonah offered. "I may take you up on that sooner than you think," King Marion said, a hint of determination returning to his voice. Over the following weeks, the impact of Jonah's and the Celestial Realm's intervention became evident. Casualty rates dropped, and the field hospital served as a neutral ground where even enemies could seek refuge and care. Jonah's reputation grew, not only as a skilled medic, but as a peacemaker. His pragmatic yet compassionate approach began to draw attention from other planetary systems, some of whom sent their own aid in support. One particularly challenging day, as Jonah navigated the complexities of treating a critical mass casualty event caused by a failed ceasefire, a delegation from the United Planetary Alliance arrived at the hospital. They were led by Ambassador Linara, a seasoned diplomat known for her efforts in resolving interstellar conflicts. She requested a tour of the facility, her interest in Jonah's work having reached far beyond Draxus 4. As they walked through the hospital, Jonah explained the setup, his protocols, and his philosophy of healing without discrimination. Ambassador Linara listened intently, her expression thoughtful. "Jonah, your work here, it's exemplary," she finally said as they stood watching a team of medics perform a life-saving surgery. "Have you ever considered advocating for peace on a larger scale? Your experience here could be invaluable in peace negotiations." Jonah was taken aback. He was a medic, not a diplomat. Yet the idea resonated with him. He had seen too much death, too much suffering. If there was a chance he could help end it, shouldn't he try? "I'm not sure I'm the right person for that kind of role," Jonah admitted. "Sometimes, the right person is the one who is already doing the job before anyone asks them to," Ambassador Linara replied, giving him a knowing look. Their conversation was interrupted by an urgent call. Jonah was needed in surgery. As he excused himself and hurried away, the seed of a new possibility was planted in his mind. In the following days, Jonah pondered Ambassador Linara's words. The idea of stepping beyond his role as a medic was daunting but not unwelcome. He spoke of this with Queen Mother Isara, seeking her counsel. "You have a gift, Jonah," Isara told him, her aged eyes wise and encouraging. "Not just in healing, but in seeing the good in others, in bridging divides. Perhaps it's time to share that gift on a larger stage." Jonah knew that whatever decision he made, the journey ahead would be challenging. But with each life he saved, each smile he brought to a recovering soldier's face, he felt ready to embrace whatever path lay ahead. If his compassion could ignite a spark of peace here, perhaps it could illuminate even darker corners of the galaxy. Jonah Marston's influence as a peacemaker grew, echoing beyond the medical tents that dotted the Draxus landscape. The hospital, initially a makeshift response to a desperate situation, had transformed into a symbol of hope and reconciliation. As Jonah walked through the corridors, he couldn't help but feel the weight of Ambassador Linara's proposal resting heavily on his shoulders. One brisk morning, as the twin suns of Draxus rose, casting a dual shadow over the encampment, Jonah was visited by a delegation from the Galactic Mediation Council, GMC. The Council, an entity dedicated to resolving interstellar conflicts through diplomacy, had taken an interest in Jonah's work. "We've been monitoring your efforts here, Mr. Marston," began Counselor Tarek, a tall, slender being from a species known for their empathic abilities. "Your approach to healing not just bodies, but also societal wounds is remarkable. We believe these methods could be instrumental in broader peace talks." Jonah listened intently, his mind racing. The idea of transitioning from hands-on medical work to negotiating tables was daunting. Yet, the potential to prevent further suffering on a larger scale was an opportunity he felt compelled to explore. "Thank you, Counselor," Jonah replied, his voice steady despite his internal turmoil. "I'm honored by your words. How exactly do you see my role in these talks?" Councillor Tarek exchanged a glance with his colleagues, their expressions unreadable. We envision you serving as a liaison between warring factions, sharing your first-hand experiences and outcomes to facilitate understanding and, hopefully, agreements. Jonah considered this. The shift from medic to diplomat was significant, but the essence of his work, helping others, remained the same. I'm willing to help, he said, but I must continue my work here until I'm certain this hospital can operate without me. Understandable, Councillor Tarek nodded. We propose a gradual integration, starting with advisory roles in upcoming negotiations. With a deep breath, Jonah agreed. The following weeks were a whirlwind of activity. He split his time between the hospital and video conferences with various diplomatic bodies, sharing his insights and advocating for nonviolent resolutions. As Jonah's dual roles became more demanding, the hospital's operations began to smooth out, allowing him more flexibility to engage with the GMC. His reputation as a voice of reason and empathy grew, drawing more attention to the cause of peace. However, the situation on Draxus remained volatile. The temporary ceasefires brokered were fragile, and tensions simmered beneath the surface. Jonah was painfully aware that his new role carried as much risk as his old one. One evening, as he prepared for a crucial GMC session, an urgent message arrived from King Marion. Jonah was summoned to a secret meeting at the Royal Command Ship orbiting high above Draxus. Arriving at the command ship, Jonah was ushered into a secure conference room where King Marion awaited, looking more somber than usual. Alongside him was Queen Mother Isara, her presence always a comfort to Jonah. Jonah, King Marion began, his voice grave. We have intelligence that a faction of hardliners is planning a significant offensive. They aim to disrupt the peace talks and seize control by force. Jonah's heart sank. What do you need from me? We need you to continue your advocacy, but also to prepare for the worst, the king replied. Your hospital and its staff could be targets. We must ensure their safety and prepare for potential evacuations. Jonah nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. We'll start preparations immediately. Security measures will be enhanced and evacuation protocols will be set. Thank you, Jonah, Queen Mother Isara said softly, her hand resting on his arm. Your courage gives us all hope. Returning to the hospital, Jonah initiated a series of emergency preparedness drills. He met with his staff, outlining the situation without inciting panic. Together they fortified the hospital, ensuring that the beacon of hope Jonah had built would stand firm against the gathering storm. As Jonah lay in his quarters that night, the weight of the galaxy seemed to press upon him. But amidst the uncertainty, he found a resolve forged in the very hospital he had created. No matter what came, he would stand ready to heal, to help, and to protect. The dawn on Draxus 4 was shadowed by the imminent threat of conflict. As Jonah Marston prepared for the day, the hospital buzzed with attention, mirroring the instability outside its walls. The skies, usually a vibrant canvas painted by the twin suns, now loomed ominously as dark cruisers dotted the horizon, signaling the impending siege. The hospital, once a makeshift sanctuary, had been fortified under Jonah's guidance. Barriers were erected, and the medical staff was drilled in emergency protocols. The air was thick with a mix of determination and dread. Jonah's role as a peacemaker had quickly evolved. He was now a key figure in sustaining not only the lives within his hospital, but also the fragile peace that hung like a thin veil over Draxus 4. His day was spent rotating between treating the wounded, coordinating with King Marion's forces, and communicating with the Galactic Mediation Council, urging them to expedite their peace negotiations. Late in the afternoon, as Jonah oversaw the treatment of a new batch of casualties brought in from a skirmish on the outskirts, an urgent communique from King Marion arrived. The hardliners had launched a major offensive, and the royal forces were struggling to hold their positions. The king's message was clear: prepare for an evacuation. Jonah's heart sank. Evacuating the hospital would be a colossal task fraught with danger. Yet there was no choice. The lives of hundreds of patients and staff depended on his next actions. He gathered his senior medical team, outlining the evacuation plan with a calm he did not feel. We need to be ready to move at a moment's notice, he explained. I'll coordinate with the King's fleet for air support. We're not leaving anyone behind. As preparations ensued, Jonah made his way to the communication room to update the Galactic Mediation Council. His plea was desperate but firm. "We need an intervention now. Lives are at stake." The response was swift. The council promised to send a convoy peacekeeping forces, but whether they would arrive in time remained a dire uncertainty. The night was restless. Jonah hardly slept as he monitored the situation, ready to act. By the early hours, the distant rumblings of war grew perilously close. It was time. The evacuation began under the cloak of darkness. Jonah, accompanied by Queen Mother Isara and a contingent of King Marian's guards, led a convoy of medical transports through the hazardous terrain of Draxus. Overhead, the royal fleet provided cover, their cruisers clashing with the hardliners' interceptors in the skies above. The journey was harrowing. Every mile gained was a victory against the looming threat of capture or destruction. Jonah's focus never wavered, his every order measured and precise, ensuring the safety of his charges. As dawn broke, a glimmer of hope pierced the horizon. The promised peacekeeping forces from the Galactic Mediation Council had arrived, their arrival heralding a turning tide. With their support, Jonah's convoy reached the designated safe zone, a fortified base on the outskirts of the capital. Exhausted but relieved, Jonah watched as the patients and staff were safely relocated. His efforts, fueled by relentless determination, had saved hundreds of lives. In the aftermath, as peace negotiations resumed with renewed urgency, Jonah's role was recognized universally. King Marian, in a public address, hailed him as a hero of Draxus, a man whose compassion had turned the tide of a conflict. Jonah, standing beside leaders from various worlds, felt a profound shift in his journey. What had begun as a mission to heal had evolved into a crusade for peace. As he looked out over the rebuilding city, Jonah knew his work was far from over. There would be more to do, more to heal, more to rebuild, more to teach. But for the first time in what felt like forever, he saw a future filled with hope. The war on Draxus 4 would be remembered not just for the conflict, but for the peace forged in its aftermath. And at the heart of that story was Jonah Marston, a medic who had become so much more. His legacy would be written in the lives he saved and the peace he helped create, a testament to the power of compassion in a galaxy often too quick to conflict.